I mean, you're in the business of getting people to open up the newspaper. And you want to do almost whatever you can do with integrity to do that. And I would submit that if you guys were to start following the personal journal, which used to be this little teeny part of the journal, but is now, I suspect, the most important section of the Wall Street Journal. Well, I think they have to do things that translate to digital. That is, that the story makes sense and can be repurposed in multiple formats. So anything we're doing in print, periodically we need to be able to turn that into text that people could read and scroll. And by the way, people love to read and scroll. On the Hewitt show, which is one of our big national shows at Salem, when he does long interviews, it turns out that when we capture the text of those interviews and put them on the website, that it's become the #1 driver on our website. And when we get a lot of people visiting the website to read those interviews, because they neither have the time nor the inclination to listen to them, we're turning the text of those interviews into money. That is, we're putting banner ads next to it, we're gathering data from our people about which interviews they're reading and clicking through, and most important, they're staying on our websites longer because they're reading something long form. So now Hewitt's actually doing longer interviews, because the longer the interview is, the longer the text is, and the longer the text is, the more time people are spending with us as opposed to someone else. And that, I think, is the game. So I think that's very important. I would say more features, more stories about stuff that people, your campus community cares about. Love, death, life, Alzheimer's. This stuff's happening all around the campus life. Somebody's family has Alzheimer's right now, and somebody's having to deal with that. There's a story there. And that would connect to a lot of people, and the next thing you know, now they're reading about what happened with the student council, even though they might not have cared what was happening with student council. So that's my take on how to thinking about print, because print's not dead. Print's alive, and it's going to continue to be alive as long as it's relevant to people's lives. You know, when you're in a business, looking at why your competitors may or may not do things is something I've rarely spent a lot of time on, because they may have their own biases, they may have their own lack of resources, or their actual beliefs may be such that they're actually costing themselves money. And by the way, the really wonderful thing about features is, and I actually believe this is another aspect of storytelling that is ignored, that is the personal story that comes in. You can call it the letter to the editor. You know, right now the way that, or the old days, the way that people came in and joined their paper was by writing a letter to the editor. And usually it was about something philosophical or something they didn't like or something they wanted to correct. And I always thought, wow, what a silly use of this person called the community and the reader. The reader has stories too. Bring them in. You gotta fact check them. You gotta make sure they're true. But you know what your cost would be for bringing a reader's story into your newspaper? Very small. So the question becomes, if you're the publisher and the editor of the paper, what do you think the purpose of a paper is? And if you're high-minded and you think that it should only deal with the important things of the community and it needs to come from the editor and publisher down to the people, well then you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But if what you think a paper is that it's a thriving part of a community that serves the community, tells the community stories to the community, then I don't understand why you wouldn't have an abundance of features and that you could find them in very low-cost settings. I'm in an endeavor on radio where I'm finding all kinds of stories, and for nothing, for zero cost, I'm finding some of my very best stories. Wow. Well, I think there are two things. I think everybody has their own story in them, whether they have a great education or not. But if you're going to then regularly write features, not just your own, I mean, in the community, I think everyone's got a story. Every single human being has a story. I deeply believe this. And if we can unearth it, that's a journalist's job. I think what a liberal arts education allows you to do is give you enough breadth and depth of life experience through reading, And by my goodness, you can experience a lot of life by just opening up a book. And I think that gives you the philosophical and I think the empathetic power to attack and approach people from every walk of life and connect the dots. If you have the proper education, and I think a liberal arts education will be the cool and smart career thing to do as it relates to how to apply that training to future life. if you try and learn, look, if you want to try and study up on what the newest technology is in terms of Facebook or Instagram, or that will change every 5 years. But the elements that make a great story, and the nature of who that storyteller is, and who can do it over and over again, I believe that's the person who has the widest and deepest breadth of curiosity and knowledge.